We begin our story by watching as Moon Knight, unimportant side character, and a living basketball all sit around a campfire and discuss foreign politics. The fun doesn't last, however, as a bunch of angry rip-off space Italians come in and ruin the party. Anyways, after Mark Spector takes over and brutally murders everyone in sight, we slowly realize that the game is broken. We notice as the space Italians are constantly having strokes, and all either seem to be a fanboy or a literal clone of the Youngling Slayer 9000. So, switching sides and then immediately betraying my brethren, we go on to commit multiple more counts of aggravated battery, with the only thing stopping us being a man without a father figure. Anyways, we watch as the living basketball rolls across the Gobi Desert, only to bump into the living embodiment of plot convenience. Now that we're in control of a character with a severe number of plot holes, we immediately lose interest and go back to watching another episode of Moon Knight, where we watch as the second black person ever helps Mark Spector try to escape from the angry rip-off space Italians. Anyways, now that we're in control of Oscar Isaac, and a man with a severe lack of character development, we find ourselves killing multiple minimum wage workers and committing multiple accounts of domestic terrorism. After cutting off some loose ends, we eventually find the mother lode, but my Xbox, deciding that fun wasn't an option, immediately just decides to break my game. This doesn't matter, however, as making game devs' lives a traumatic, mind-numbing experience is my specialty. So now that we're in a stealth mission, we get behind enemy lines and decide to steal one of their 2001 Chevy Tahoes. Unfortunately for us, however, out of all of the voices in Moon Knight's head, not a single one of them has a driver's license. So we gently park our 2001 Chevy Tahoe in the middle of an oversized desert. Anyways, we cut back to main female character and moving basketball to go on probably the most broken mission in this entire game. After that absolute mess of game design and introducing female main character to the wonderful world of drugs, we find a glitch in the simulation and experience what it's like to live in a third world country. Anyways, now that we're in an unimportant fight for our life over a basketball, we find ourselves confronting John Boyega, not because he stole the jacket from Moon Knight, but because the living basketball was a racist. The fun didn't last, however, as the extremely sexist and racist space Italians noticed the group of minorities right in front of them and decided that they would have some fun of their own. Luckily for us, however, we had something that the entirety of the space Italians did not: plot convenience. After handing the driving wheel to a woman, and then to a drunk driver, we find ourselves accidentally killing multiple innocent civilians and soccer moms, and then finally escaping the angry space Italians, only to be caught by Indiana Jones and his pet dog. The meetup didn't last, however, as the KKK and FaZe Clan, who went to go confront Harrison Ford about his racially motivated tweet towards racists. However, little did any of them know that there were two special ed kids inside of the air vents, who decided to try to push some funny buttons. Little was anybody expecting, however, that plot convenience suddenly became plot inconvenience, as the good, the bad, and the ugly are released from their cages, suddenly turning this from an action movie into a horror movie. Anyways, after a delightful stroll through the neighborhood, we find ourselves escaping the small army of Twitter users. We then cut back to a meeting between the angry space Italians, where they discuss plans to finally destroy the German army once and for all. Anyways, cut back to female main character driving, where we finally land in Florida, where we find ourselves in control of Harrison Ford, a racist basketball, plot convenience the character, Indiana Jones's pet dog, and ex-Klan fighter John Boyega. Little were we expecting, however, that female main character was starting to have a schizophrenic episode. Curious as to why all of the voices inside of her head are talking about your mother, she went on a search to look for the source of her schizophrenia. schizophrenia. Little was she expecting, however, that the source of her schizophrenia was from the schizophrenic himself, because as it turns out, all of the voices inside of her head were coming from Mark Hamill's oversized glow stick, and whenever she grabs it, she accidentally touches some of the leftover meth and goes on a massive LSD trip. After the psychedelics wore off, we find ourselves under attack by the angry space Italians. Deciding that the time was dire, they hand the highly illegal glow stick to a heavily intoxicated traitor. Luckily for Harrison Ford, however, handing this person that he's only known for 20 minutes a weapon that has literally turned children into a 5-star fillet was actually a great idea. Anyways, one reference in War Crime later, we cut back to female main character who was caught by an extremely angry racist, but with daddy issues. Anyways, after plot convenience became plot inconvenience, we find ourselves meeting up with Moon Knight, where he tells us about an even bigger and even more destructive space meatball. So Harrison Ford, who is more hungry than ever, decided that we would travel to the even bigger and more destructive space meatball. We cut back to female main character who is currently escaping with her one superpower: plot convenience. Anyways, hard cut back to Harrison Ford, his pet dog, and the Adventure Time main character, who are currently being held at gunpoint by a bunch of extremely angry space Italians. Luckily for them, however, Harrison Ford was an avid believer in the Second Amendment. Anyways, after basically backhanding a bunch of racists, we find ourselves on the hunt for our Chromie homie, and we do this in the least Lego kid-friendly ways possible. Anyways, now that we've gotten Chromie homie to take the marinara sauce off of the giant space meatball, we literally crush their spine, and then immediately meet up with female main character. Anyways, now that we've allowed the German army to come in and invade the giant space meatball, we learn that we have to do a little bit of domestic terrorism. Unfortunately for us, however, we're paid a visit by an angry racist, but with daddy issues, who Harrison Ford, for no apparent reason, decides to literally walk up to him and help fix his de-living device, only to fall down a giant hole. Anyways, we cut back to Moon Knight, who recently got his driving permit and is currently annihilating the space Italians, and even breaks into the giant space meatball to blow up a nuke from the inside. While this is all happening, however, female main character and John Boyega find themselves being attacked by a now fatherless racist, who we, for some reason, even though we've had literally no laser sword training whatsoever, absolutely obliterate him. Anyways, after the biggest piece of plot convenience in plot convenience history, and even more plot convenience, we finally destroy the even bigger giant space meatball, and head back to the German army, where we meet a blue trash can, who just so happens to have even more plot convenience within him. After creating a few more plot holes and becoming a Skyrim horse, we finally get to meet the one-armed schizophrenic, and then we finally end our story.